not need one. One run.
521.
Sorry, need a card for a parking problem.
And for your 23.
Yeah, that's where I'm gonna 28 for one truck when you're ready.
Go ahead.
For one truck, Boy Lincoln X-ray 985 should come back up heading.
Toyota 2000. Patrick Spalding.
10-4. If you can just put a little note in something like that, I'm gonna be leaving a note on his vehicle so I can remove it.
Rockingham 505. Enter vandalism case for Athens. Explain it. Soon to be X. Slashed her tires and has made threatening comments to her. She's concerned he might return.
And forgive this at 32.
10-4. You're assigned to a vandalism case in Athens. Did you copy the 505?
Yeah, 4. Look at that. No, 3 in Depot Street. Truck boy entry 5.
7435. 10-4.
Can you go to 43 again?
143.
You go with that 43 you had. I didn't hear any, but it just looks like we do.
10-4. I just wanted to know if you should be put back 76 to Cabana Circle or to the subject's address.
Yeah, I'll be 23 back on that found property case, and I'll be 76 to the Williams Road address to see if I can find the owner.
10-4. 449-1120.
Now 449, 1121, thank you.
10-4.
Code 4. 4.
Rockview 535.
You have a great house.
535.
Should be. You guys know if our woman who fucked into a house. I'll slide up that way.
Caller is now been able to close the front door. He is now pounding on the door, trying to get it still. So applied for long-term care. Number 24 is open.
Switch is on, here comes the throttle. Chevy breakers in. We have separation. Inboard and outboard are on. Coming forward with the side stick. Directions. I've got a blowout. Neighbor 3. Engine out again. Hold altitude. Correction. Alpha is on. Track selected. Emergency. Flight call. I can't hold it. She's breaking up. She's breaking.
Hey guys, thank you for being here with me today. Grant will be here, Grant Smith Ellis at 4:30 around that. He's covering the BC basketball game. I'm not sure what covering means. I don't know if he does broadcasting or some kind of reporting on it, live tweeting. I'm not sure. We'll have to ask him, but that's a pretty cool thing to be doing, and that's a pretty good reason for coming on at 4:30. So for now, it's just us, right? So we got some stuff to talk about. I want to just also mention that I have up a video if you guys can check it out. This is the first in a series of interviews I've been doing with convicted murderer Bill Nogueira. This first video, the topic was the Night Stalker Richard Ramirez, and I've had some feedback from some people that said, you know, it's a good video, but it's just they don't like the fact that I'm doing an interview with a murderer, and I understand that. For me, it's worth it because Bill is an incredibly intelligent, perceptive guy, and it's amazing to me that he's able to really have a full awareness of the modern world, even though he's been in prison since 1984. So for those of you that are younger, that's about 10 years before the rise of the internet. And it's just amazing that he has this really, you could plop him into a boardroom right now and he'd fit right in. And here's a guy who went to prison when he was 18. So he's a very intelligent guy. Now, he spent 40 years on death row in the famous San Quentin, in the same unit as he was on death row. So in the same unit as the serial killers. And he developed a fascination with those guys. Now, serial killers are marked men in prison. So they have to be very careful and they're very guarded about who they let have access to them. So Bill kind of managed to get access by maybe implying to them that he was like them. I don't know. You can look at that and judge it how you want, but he already had a plan early on to start getting into the heads of these guys, getting to know them so that he could become kind of his own profiler from prison. And he does have a lot of very useful insights. In addition, he actually has helped solved a cold case. And we won't be able to talk about that on the channel for a while because he has a book coming out on it and a Netflix series. So we'll be able to start talking about that when the book comes out, but only once the publisher gives us permission to do it. And I am working with the publisher, so she wants us to do it, but the timing has to be right. But for now, he has a lot of other things to go over. He spent a lot of time getting to know other serial killers. Some of these names, they would mean a lot more to Dave McGrath, who's like an encyclopedia on true crime. To me, I had heard of some of them, like the dating game killer. He got Rodney Ocala. He got to know him quite a bit. The toolbox killers, the freeway killer. I mean, these are just some of the guys that he spent his days getting to know what made their minds tick. And he's just a really interesting guy to talk to about any subject. And I'm talking, you can tell during the interview that I'm talking to someone that's in prison. You can tell. Sometimes it gets, we do the interviews in the morning because that's when it's the most quiet, but it still gets loud enough. You can hear a lot of yelling in the background. And on one of the more recent interviews, he actually got interrupted and I got a little worried, like, because he's been shanked a couple of times in prison. But this guy's a survivor. He's been in that Darwinian environment for over 40 years. He never joined the gangs. Even he is Hispanic, but he's never joined the gangs. But that also makes him a target. But he's 6'2", 240, was a martial arts competitor in high school before he committed murder. So he's a pretty tough guy. He's a very tough guy. So I guess but mostly the way you learn to survive is by being intensely aware of your surroundings all the time. And you can even feel that intensity when he's on the phone. I think the Guerra says he's talked to someone in jail. He's probably done that a lot, my understanding is, but that's another issue. So anyways, please check that out. And we'll be launching a new channel soon called The Mind Stalker. And this will be co-owned by me and Bill. And it's an interesting thing to talk to him, and I hope you guys will check it out. I also did my own narration and research into Richard Ramirez, who is a fascinating killer. I'm not someone that generally studies a lot of serial killers. I'm not even, I know I say this all the time and it surprises people. I'm actually not that much into true crime. It kind of makes me feel down about the world. Where I do get into true crime is a little different from other people. I get into it because I like a puzzle. So I do like the unsolved true crimes, and I like understanding the mind. And it's just these guys that kill just for the sake of killing is fascinating, right? Because they have a different brain, and in most cases, these guys were born with that brain. But if there's an exception to the rule, it's the Night Stalker. This guy, almost anybody that went through what he went through growing up would become a serial killer. I mean, the guy was practically groomed in it. So you'll get to see, and there was a lot of brain damage that seems to have been done on him. He had an abusive father that beat him up a lot when he was under the age of 4. And so at that crucial time when your brain is forming, he did suffer. There were several times where he was beat unconscious. So that probably affected the normal development of his brain and his ability to feel empathy for other human beings. But and then by the time he was committing his murder spree, when he was, I think, 22 years old, and his spree only lasted a little more than a year, he was by that point a major drug addict. So he was high all the time. Now the drugs didn't cause him to commit the murders, but they make some of what he does seem really disorganized and impulsive. And people that study serial killers know that the FBI classifies serial killers either into disorganized or organized. Excuse me, I'm gonna pop a cough drop. I have a cold. So he probably would naturally fall into the disorganized type. But when you're high on drugs, and at that time it was particularly coke, you're going to be a little bit of a disorganized type. Now, before Grant comes on too, there's been a lot of stuff going on this week, and in the Karen Reed case, of course, man, I just wish, unlike, I don't know, I just wish this case would go away. I'm stuck on it now because it's become a main part of my life, but there's so many better things that I'd rather be working on. It would be just awesome if Karen did it, it would be great if she just came out tomorrow and said, I did it. Or if there's a conspiracy, it would be awesome if the feds just blew it open tomorrow. I mean, Sean was saying they were going to do it Thursday, right? This past Thursday. That didn't happen. But believe it or not, it would just be awesome for me. Whatever happens, put an end to it so I can just stop putting time into this, But for now, I'm the kind of person that I want to see things through. So I want to do it whether there's 50 people watching me or 100. I know that if I went down a different path and wanted to grift, I would just ride the conspiracy wave and the mob would be behind me and I'd have, several hundred, if not a couple of thousand viewers for these lives. Money would be rolling in, but I don't have any interest in grifting. I'm a guy, to me, it doesn't make me a hero or anything. It's just, to me, it's always been my natural bend to want to know the truth and to tell the truth. It's a simple thing. I don't think it makes you really a hero that you want to tell the truth and you want to know the truth. I thought it was just a normal thing that most people are like that. But something about YouTube draws out these kind of grifting types that have realized you can make money off it. It's a hustle, basically. It's a kind of hustle for them. And the way you can tell that is if they actually have never read any documents. They might claim to have read a document. That's, it's easy. Anybody can claim that, right? But all they've really actually read is TB Daily News. And you can tell that, you can spot that right away. You can spot it right away. They have not read a document. Why? There's no interest in finding out what the truth is. They don't ask questions of both sides. There's no interest in that. It's all full speed ahead on one side. And it's just, I don't really, but people are interested in that. So that's fine, because there's a level of anything that goes on YouTube or on the internet of fantasy. You're participating in something that is outside of your life and you're not directly connected to, so you kind of attach yourself to it. And so in this case here, you have this fantasy for people that are interested in the truth and that have questions on both sides, but tend to think that there might be something unusual going on here and a cover up. That's one thing. That's different. That's a normal, intelligent human being to me, even if you have different opinions on this case than I do. But I remember even just like a couple months ago, Aiden had Rita Lombardi on the channel, because I just happened to tune in. It was about the most boring issue, is that thing about the Canton, the audit of the police. I put it on for a couple minutes, and Rita's like, I am 100% sure Karen is innocent. How could you possibly be 100% sure that Karen is innocent? No one in the house saw John O'Keefe. Okay. The evidence that even suggests that anybody killed John inside that house is minimal at best. Now, maybe you believe there's something there that's worth exploring and it's worth trying to get it out. Okay, that's fine. But to be 100% sure, that's irrational. That's your buying into a fantasy for your own reasons. Whatever those reasons are, you have these personal reasons where it matters to you that you no longer are asking questions and you're just going to buy into it 100%. And that's just the way you're going to do it. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in people that care about the truth and are willing to have a discussion about it. And I always say, I'm just a bartender. Sean likes to point out to you too, why would you trust a guy that all he knows how to do is make Bloody Marys? Okay, why would you? For me, and yes, he does have, I don't think he's ever been part of a murder investigation, but he did have 25 or 30 years. I don't know the exact number. And if he's listening, I apologize that I don't remember, Sean, but he has extensive experience in federal law enforcement. Okay. What I trust in, and that I will always trust in until it proves me wrong, is my ability to logically analyze evidence. I'm good at solving puzzles. There's most things in life I'm not good at. So you can disagree with me, that's okay. But if you're interested in my thought process on this case, then check it out. And if you're not interested in it, well, what the hell? There's better things to do, right? I wouldn't be watching someone that I'm not interested in. So, that's, now I spent a lot of time over the last couple of weeks, well, really since the beginning, but definitely a lot in the last couple of weeks trying to analyze what's going on with the feds. And there was a lot of interest. There was new stuff that came out this week. That was a very fascinating hearing this week. And Yannetti was on Zoom and he went out, and I rewatched. I wasn't fooled initially by his statement, but because I knew he was conflating two separate things. On the one hand, the feds told him there was an ongoing investigation. And on the other hand, we know that the DA from Norfolk County has been writing letters to the feds asking if they're investigating what, if they're investigating them, if they're a target. And the feds never replied to any of these things. So they don't know. But he conflated those two things and said the feds are investigating an ongoing their ongoing investigation is looking into corruption in Norfolk County with the DA's office. And, when I went back and watched it, yeah, he really did at first I thought my live impression was he didn't say that he actually just was crafty in the way he worded it, knowing that it would fool certain people in the public, but that it would never fool the judge or the DA or anybody in the legal profession. But no, he actually really did put out a dishonest statement. Maybe he skirted the law just enough, kind of like with the non-human hair thing, where you're not going to get sanctioned. If you're a defense lawyer, you get a lot of latitude in trying to help defend your client. So, but this caused the DA to produce a statement saying that was basically a lie. And then the extremely unusual, the U.S. Attorney's Office put out their own statement saying, yeah, that is not what we said. We at no point said who or what was the target of our investigation. So that's really interesting. That doesn't mean that Morrissey is not the target. He might be, but we just know that the feds are not saying what the target of their investigation was, let alone whether they found anything. Now, there are still witnesses due to testify in front of the federal grand jury. Got to be careful. I don't want to say much more on this, but I don't know. I can't really say much about it, but I can just tell you this, that if you can decide whether or not to trust me or not, but logically, if you know how these witness subpoena letters went out and who they went to, you would say, this is pretty close to wrapped up. It's over. And one question that I've been asking since this summer, and I reached out to my old college roommate who is a judge, but not around here. What would the feds do if they had exculpatory information in a murder case that was a state murder case, as a murder case generally is? And he said that they generally ignore what's going on with the state investigation, in his opinion, and they would just follow their regular course of their investigation. But that doesn't seem to be the case here, according to David Yannetti. David Yannetti, part of his statement the other day, also said, and remember, this was told to Yannetti in a conference call where either the DA or his representatives were on the call. So they were all in on it. And it sounds like the U.S. Attorney's Office indicated to them that they will be concluding at least the Karen Reed part of their investigation in a couple of weeks and giving both sides the results of what they found. So that's really, really interesting if that's the case. I think it's now where Yannetti didn't tell the truth on the other part of it. Maybe he wasn't telling the truth about that. However, the DA's office did not dispute it, and the U.S. Attorney's Office did not say anything about that in their statement either. So they didn't dispute it either. So it sounds like the Attorney's Office is going to make the perhaps unusual step here. I don't know if they'll make a statement, but giving out that information to both sides is almost as good, because eventually it will come out. So we'll find out what they found, if they found anything. We may never know what they were initially looking into. And that's something that has puzzled me for a while. I know I've been read over the phone the messages from Karen to Natalie, her friend in California. Now, Natalie is the kind of person that doesn't lie. She doesn't really have the same, she has a different interest in this case. Her interest was Karen, who was her friend. And her interest in these things generally, really, she's not into puzzles in the same way that I might be. She's not into the actual investigation. And so some of the things that might not capture her attention when they were at the time or even later, they do with me. So I asked her to give me the information on that, and she read them over the phone to me. Now, these were from May 5th of this past year. I don't know, let's go further back. In August of 2022, Karen was messaging Natalie to say the FBI is going to come to the rescue. And more specifically, she was saying that then first U.S. Attorney for Boston, Josh Levy, had said he was going to make an exception and get personally involved in this. That's weird. And it's not just weird that he's involved, but it's very weird that he's communicating that to them. Now, I don't know if the communications were going straight from Levy to Karen or straight from Levy to one of her attorneys, but it had to be coming straight from him because it was in quotes, make an exception. So he was communicating. That's very odd. So back in the odd thing about one of the other unusual things about that back in the summer of 2022 is this is long before the defense had access to the phone material from John O'Keefe and from Jen McCabe. So I mean, my understanding is that Rich Green, the defense analyst that the forensic data analyst that the defense hired, did not reach his conclusions until March of 2023, so less than a year ago. And it was right after that the whole thing, they took on Turtle Boy and made this into a big thing. But in the summer of 2022, it was not something that was in the public eye. Turtle was unaware of it. He wasn't investigating it. And but something had to predicate that investigation. Now, DA Morrissey himself, in his letters, seems to speculate that then U.S. Attorney Rachel Rollins had a personal or political motive or revenge factor or something like that against DA Morrissey, and that might have been why the feds were looking into it. It's also possible that maybe there's some personal connections here. Jackson and Yannetti have a lot of people in their contact list in their phones, no doubt. A lot of people that they know personally. So maybe someone's doing them a favor, right? But you can't just get if you're Rachel Rollins and you want to sick the feds on a DA that you don't like, you can't just say, all right, this isn't Russia. You can't just order them to do it. Or likewise, if you're the first U.S. attorney, you can't just say, well, I'm a friend of so-and-so's and I'm going to do this. No, there has to be some predication. Now, the friendship or the personal grudge factor comes into play where when you have that, now you have a receptive person on the other end. So you reach out to the feds, and normally you got a complaint. You say, I think the FBI should be interested in this. If it's just a normal situation, they're like, yeah, all right, go ahead. What do you got? But if it's a friend, like, okay, what do you got? Right. But they still have to have something, because otherwise they need that something to cover their own ass. And there are rules and laws applicable here. So because you're talking about not just sending in a couple of FBI agents to knock on doors. You're talking about starting a whole process of grand juries and subpoenas and stuff like that. It's a big deal. It's a lot of resources, and it's a lot of power being used. And if it's not being used appropriately, abused. So what was there at the time that would be sufficient to give the FBI, even if or to give the U.S. Attorney's Office, even if they're looking for an excuse for some reason to investigate somebody here? What was it that was there? And this puzzled me for a long time. Obviously, I don't have the solution to it. I just have a theory that I put out this morning. So, because when you look at the defense, the main part of their third-party culprit theory here, a lot of it has to do with the data, 227 searches and health apps that supposedly showed John walking up and down stairs. But that was not available in the summer of 2022. So what could they be looking at? You could look at, I guess, the autopsy photos, right? And with the autopsy photos, you could say, well, all right, that looks like a dog attack on his right arm, right? Or it looks like he's been in a fight. Okay, but I don't think that's enough, because you have numerous medical staff saying, no, he wasn't in a fight, and nobody found evidence of a dog attack. So I just don't think it's been puzzling me for weeks. That wouldn't be enough, And so what occurred to me last night is one thing that they might be able to use is if they had a whistleblower, not somebody flipping. So somebody that, let's say, that was part of the crime, which if you're inside that house and you don't go to the police or make any effort to try to save John's life, you are now participating in that crime. So if you're a participant and then later on, through a pangs of conscience or a fear, you flip, then you go to the feds or somebody else in the police. That's flipping. That's different. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a whistleblower, and this would be someone that gets information that could suggest a conspiracy, and then you go to the feds or to the state or to local law enforcement or whatever. This makes sense to me, because a whistleblower, now, especially if you have someone that was in law enforcement, that makes a lot of sense to me, because that will be very powerful, very useful if you're inclined to get a federal investigation going. Let's say you are a U.S. attorney and you want to get this thing launched. If you have someone that's in law enforcement who wasn't present for any of it, but has picked up things that to him make him say this whole investigation was suspicious, then you could just kind of find a little bit of suspicious stuff. That would probably be enough where later on, if it turns out there was no cover up, the feds could say, well, we went through the proper process. We had significant predication in order to launch this thing. Now, we also know that people, I guess maybe a combination of at least one present law enforcement officer. I'm not sure about this, so I don't want to, if people from CPD are watching this, I want to be careful and say I don't actually know. I know that some of Sean on the Gulf's sources are Canton police law enforcement, but I don't know if some of them are retired. I don't know if he has any. Well, he claims to have had someone that was in the office and took the call from John about drug dealing in the neighborhood. So his source was at least, and I believe that incident happened within a year, maybe a year before John's death, or within a year. So not that far back. And so that person, if they're retired now, maybe, but they were working then. So could a whistleblower that recently retired from CPD, or even still works there, possibly has a grudge? Kevin Albert is a very highly respected detective on the Canton Police Department, and I've talked to multiple people that know him in different capacity, from different relationships to him, and they all say he's one of those straight shooting types of cops. Now, is it possible that somebody had a grudge because he was passed over when he made detective? I don't know. I mean, that's all just speculation. But to me, what makes the most sense here, in order to get this federal investigation launched, is that there was some kind of a whistleblower, and I would guess that possibly that whistleblower has, in the intervening time, been working directly with Karen and directly with Sean. Again, don't take that to the bank. Take it and say, all right, does it make sense? We do know that Sean has contacts in Canton law enforcement. Sean grew up in Canton, so that's his connection to this. He lives in Florida now, and so he doesn't have a direct connection to the case in any way. But his original interest in the case was because he is from Canton and was following the story when it broke out, like a lot of us, and we were all following it on TV Daily News. I had not been following TV Daily News before that. I had heard of it, but I had never been to the website or listened to his show. So this is interesting to me, but there is a level of seemingly of wrongdoing here with the feds too. And this is the thing that I don't want to see covered up. This needs to be rooted out and exposed. If I'm not accused now, Josh Levy may turn out to be one of the good guys here. I don't know what went on with that. I don't know. It's we can't really say. He seems to have the kind of pedigree that you would not expect him to be easily duped, but he could have been. He doesn't seem to have the kind of pedigree that he would want to be caught up in somebody's political trick. This is a guy that graduated magna cum laude from Georgetown Law. Undergraduate school, he went to Brown. This is a very elite man. And he was a partnership for 18 years in Ropes and Gray, a very prestigious law firm. So, he leaves that in 2020 to take the job in the U.S. Attorney's Office, which means he probably has ambitions for a judgeship, or maybe possibly AG, but I would say probably a judgeship. And so that's why you take a job like that and you build up your public cred a little bit. And maybe he'll make a good judge, I don't know. But integrity matters. And we need to get to the bottom of this. Why was he messaging Karen? Why was he messaging her attorneys? Why? You have to come clean with all that. You want to be a judge, you got to come clean with that stuff. Was it all on the up and up? We also know that he was involved himself with questioning the witnesses that were subpoenaed, some of them. And his questioning was brutal. It was brutal. It was hard. Some have said vicious. Now, maybe you can say that's just a guy trying to do his job. I don't know. But nobody broke, nobody changed their story. And the evidence here is slam dunk. Again, people try to think like, who's feeding me the information? And sorry, Grant's here. I'm going to bring him on a second. So is somebody who got to Kevin? Who twisted his mind? The evidence got to Kevin. That's all. That's it. I don't have a skin in this game. I've never been to the town of Canton. I don't have any ambitions of being some big YouTube channel. I don't have any ambitions of anybody involved in the case. I don't have a future in law enforcement. I have no reason to want to tell anything but the truth and to want to get to anything but the truth. That's it. And the evidence here, I'm not going to go over it now because we've gone over it so many times. I want to bring Grant on. But the evidence is A, slam dunk, and B, of a nature that it really cannot be fabricated. It's, the burying of taillight pieces next to, not impossible, but very, very extremely difficult and very, very unlikely. And then you have the GPS, the data from the GPS and the Waze, and that stuff can't be faked. And then you got the vehicle data. And then there's a lot of other strange things, such as Karen's changing statements on the case and stuff like that. But you don't even really need to go down there until you're trying to figure out why it was second degree and whether there was malicious intent. So to me, the evidence is irrefutable. And I trust in my ability to apply logic. That's it. I'm not being influenced by anybody else. So let me bring on Grant Smith Ellis. Hey, Grant, how you doing, buddy?
Good, Kevin. How you doing? I just getting home. How's your show going so far?
Oh, well, it was, had to hold it up without you. So, it was a lot of pressure. I feel like Johnny Carson without Ed McMahon there to laugh,
I enjoy watching Johnny Carson's old interviews. I think other than Dick Cavett, I think I've watched him interview people the most. So.
Yeah, I used to love Johnny Carson, maybe because it was like an excuse to stay up late when I was a kid. Back then, kids had bedtimes. I don't know if they still do, but yeah, I did enjoy, and I do love. I don't watch a lot of Netflix or any of that stuff. I probably should because I'm writing stuff, but I actually get stuck on YouTube clips. That's why I start getting ready to go to bed around 10:30, and I watch YouTube clips for a half hour. Lately, I've been watching a lot of Curb Your Enthusiasm.
The algorithm knows that you're a fan. But yes, let's dive in because there is a lot to discuss. This is actually the first interview I'm doing since the court hearing. I believe it was Thursday at 3 p.m. down in Norfolk Superior. So happy to dive in and talk about whatever you'd like.
Okay, we can start from wherever you want to start, and I will jump in with questions. As you know, even if we're talking privately, I always have questions. So, what was your take on Yannetti's statement and then the subsequent corrections that came out from the DA and then the U.S. Attorney's Office?
I think you would have to be a very bad lawyer to not understand the word target has a connotation in the context of a federal investigation. And when you use the word target 4 times, and then both the Norfolk DA and the U.S. Attorney General's office come out with statements saying the Norfolk DA, and in fact, no one was ever a target of this investigation related to the Reed matter. That really is pretty telling. The U.S. Attorney's Office, whether it's for Massachusetts or any district, does not make a habit of putting public statements out when there has not been an indictment or something of that nature. That is a very rare. It is rarer than the step that Mr. Yannetti tried to preview during the hearing itself, when he suggested that the U.S. AG's office would be releasing files in the case to the Reed side and the Commonwealth side. That would be out of the norm. But what was even more out of the norm was the U.S. AG the U.S. Attorney having to correct Mr. Yannetti on the record. I think it was through Ted Daniels at Fox 25 that statement came out. Very abnormal. Really shows that perhaps Mr. Yannetti, Mr. Jackson, and Ms. Reed are being hung out to dry here. That was my read of that sort of series of events.
So yeah, I don't. You probably didn't hear. I was talking a little bit though about that second part of this of Unetti's statement where he said that the feds are going to kind of get them their report within a couple of weeks, and it doesn't. And the DA,
He didn't say report. He said
yeah,
pieces of information from their investigation. He didn't imply there was a report being written or anything.
right. I'm sorry. Yes, and that's the way I said it. Basically, relevant information to the Karen Reed aspects of whatever they're investigating. And I noticed that the DA and the U.S. Attorney's Office did not correct that. So,
Yeah, but I also noticed that Morrissey's letter was originally about not only the federal investigation, but also mentioned that it had state grand jury information in it. That was kind of part of the motion when Morrissey initially tried to impound the letters. So couple that with that very interesting reference in Morrissey's motion to withdraw the opposition to releasing the letters, where Morrissey specifically mentioned that it also involves the OIG's Office of Professional Responsibility. Those two things right there, prosecutors don't speak. They use speaking indictments or speaking motions. Those two words, state grand jury and DOJ's Office of Professional Responsibility, there's a story there. We just don't know what it is.
right. You probably don't care to speculate, but obviously we have an idea what the state grand jury is they're talking about. But
Well, from the Turtle Boy testimony, of course, at the arraignment hearing on, I believe it was January 8th, from 9 a.m. until 4:32 p.m. precisely Eastern time. That was a very long day in court. During that hearing, Turtle Boy and the victim actually both testified to this ongoing grand jury. I think Turtle Boy provided more details than the victim, but both indicated that there's an active state grand jury targeting Karen Reed, but also involving Turtle Boy. Now, what's interesting is Turtle Boy said the name Josh Levy on the stand when he was talking about the grand jury. But I have to wonder if that wasn't kind of bait, because it doesn't seem like the state would investigate the U.S. Attorney's Office for Massachusetts. But anyway, that whole situation, I think there is overlap here, obviously, between the Turtle Boy situation, the Karen Reed situation, the Alan Jackson, David Yannetti situation, the U.S. Attorney's Office for Massachusetts, both Rachel Rollins and Josh Levy, and the Norfolk DA's office. I think all of these circles, much like Harvard finals clubs are overlapping concentric social circles of influence, all of these circles in these two cases overlapped and intersect. The question is, what is the nexus? What is the locus? And I think you kind of hit on it earlier today, Kevin. Something happened in April or May of 2023 when Karen Reed and her team hooked up Turtle Boy with the FBI. And I think that kind of may be central to Turtle Boy's involvement, but it also may help to explain that maybe Karen Reed's lawyers or Karen Reed or someone in her orbit has really good federal connections as well. So I think we're kind of starting to see a picture emerge here of what might have been happening.
And I just want to say that we don't know for sure that there was an actual connection there. I'll give you what we have. And people, I think, can make the obvious connection, but that doesn't, that's not beyond a reasonable doubt. So on May 5th, 2023, this past May, Aiden was in a situation that he was described as really down in the dumps over this. He was facing a felony charge in Rhode Island. And I'm not going to mention the woman's name, and hopefully she watches this show. I've never had communication with her, so she probably doesn't. But if she does, please reach out to me. And if there's some part of this that I'm missing or I've gotten wrong, please, your name will be kept in confidence and get out to me. But so May 5th, Turtle Boy was down in the dumps about this potential felony case that has nothing to do with the Karen Reed case. And he reached out through Natalie to Karen to say, I'm really down. I need help. And Karen replied back. She sounded like she was actually in a very ebullient mood that day. She's kind of playful. And she said, yeah, AJ is home alone with her, his daughter. He's got nothing to do. Give him a call. And then she said Ajax. And then she sent a picture of an Ajax can. And then finally she said, in case there was any confusion, Alan Jackson. So
she should have used the Amsterdam Soccer Club Ajax. But anyway, sorry, that's where my mind.
So now I also noted that at no point did she feel the need to say, get in touch with AJ, here's his number. because unlike what Turtle Boy was telling you all summer, Turtle Boy already had the number and had been in communication with them, been in communication with the lawyer since April and with Karen since mid-May, directly with Karen. But at that point, it was May 5th. So at that, it was around May 15th where Turtle Boy started communicating over Signal directly with Karen. But up to that point, it was through Natalie. Now, so did he reach
People
out
do
to Alan
realize.
Jackson?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, of course. Did he reach out to Alan Jackson and when?
Yeah,
Especially
and I want
if
to
that
connect.
relationship was first before Karen Reed.
Right. And I just want to let me clear this up quickly, Grant. I don't want to, so people won't get lost in it. So just the timing. So May 5th, that's when those messages went between Turtle Boy and Karen. Okay. Now on June 8th, I'm not going to mention the person's name in case they don't want to, but there are a couple of people that had been in regular contact with this victim in Rhode Island. She had reached out to them. And so she told them that what she thought was a fake FBI person had called her up on the phone and basically scared the crap out of her. All right. And then she went silent, wouldn't talk to anybody. And then she finally reached out to them on June 8th. So on June 8th, she explained all that. And then she said, I didn't know what, but that's why she said, that's why I've been quiet for 4 weeks. So roughly 4 weeks prior to June 8th is when the FBI agent contacted her. That matches up beautifully with the May 5th messaging that we just talked about between Karen and Aiden. And we now know, and she also, I'm not going to say it, but we know the name of the FBI agent. It was not a fake. It is a real agent. It's a real agent. So again, we don't know exactly what happened in that call. And I'm not the type to reach out to people that don't want to be bothered. She was scared and went into don't fuck with my life kind of mode because Turtle Boy was sicking his mob on her and her whole family. Because this is what he does. But that's another story. We have to stop this Aidenism before it destroys any more people. But so anyways, there is that connection.
Why did the FBI agent feel the need to go to someone who is being victimized by Turtle Boy? We don't know the answer to that. And we also don't know the answer to the question, why did Turtle Boy and Alan Jackson have communication before Turtle Boy was linked to Karen through Natalie? Am I right about that?
No, that communication didn't, as far as I know, didn't come until after the first story broke on April 18th. And then so sometime over the next couple of weeks, the communication became more direct.
Turtle Boy's first story, and you're saying Jackson reached out for the first time after that.
Yeah, I don't know the exact dates of that, but you can see from the May 5th thing that obviously Turtle Boy didn't ask for Alan's number. He already had it. So they'd already been calling. And I can tell you, even just at the end of July, Turtle Boy reached out to me. He said, Alan Jackson wants to talk to you. And he gave me Alan Jackson's number. And I texted Alan Jackson. I said, this is Kevin from Yellow Cottage Tales. I understand you want to talk to me. I said, I'm happy to talk to you. However, you should know that I'm always going to cover this neutrally and objectively. And he said, that's okay. I respect that. I'd still like to touch base with you. I'm traveling tomorrow, but I'll call you the next day. He never actually did call me. So I never have spoken to Alan Jackson. But I do still have that message.
But, well, no, they definitely had a meeting about that. My read of that is they had a meeting about it. And the result was, no, we're not going to talk to Kevin.
Because they knew that they wanted to shut me up, but they could tell I was not going to be shut up. I'm going to ask questions. That's it. You're not going to intimidate me, but
yeah, I would generally say it is not. Some people who make an approach to threaten someone are normally going to profile them first. I don't get the sense that would have worked with you. So I think they probably were thinking of that as more of let's see if we can swing him to believe this version of the events kind of thing. And then the calculus would have been, well, there's no way that we're going to be able to manipulate him. So why would we even talk to him? Because he'll use it against us later. That's how I would have game planned it.
Right. And at that time, I was very much on the fence. I was kind of 50-50. And if you caught me on a certain day, I might be 55-45. And then the other day I'd be 45-50. But you could I'm just going to keep asking those questions and I'm just not going to believe what somebody tells me. And to me, it's just common sense too. You get, to me, even if there was a massive conspiracy, but you don't know, you start out, you're getting all of your information from one source, Turtle Boy, that clearly was an advocate and was making a lot of money off it. That doesn't mean he's lying automatically, but if you just accept that and don't seek out other sources, you're not really interested in the truth. But go ahead.
Well, a few things. One, it does seem like there's a lot of My Fair Ladying going on. That old movie or book there, My Fair Lady, which is an apocryphal tale or anecdotal tale, maybe apocryphal, about how you can engage in diplomacy with honey or vinegar. And My Fair Lady is by using honey. But the other thing that I think really is central to all of this is who's under whose thumb. Is Reed under Turtle Boy's thumb? Is Turtle Boy under Reed's thumb? Is everybody under everybody's thumb? I've said this has it's not, I called it stupid mafia vibes before, but I think it's something worse. I think it's an appropriation of like people who are on the periphery of higher levels of government. And it's kind of like watching the movie Eyes Wide Shut and realizing the pianist always is blindfolded when he gets invited to the high society fashion parties. It's kind of like someone like that who only has the first level password to some of these clubs, but has picked up some of their tactics and is weaponizing them. And a lot of that centers around honeypots, blackmail, revenge porn, threats, a lot of the stuff we're seeing here. But the thing is, this isn't stuff that's supposed to be in the hands of, I don't know how to describe these human beings, but they are not high level political operatives. Maybe Mr. Jackson and Mr. Yannetti and some of the folks in the Reed orbit are, but the games that these folks are playing and weaponizing sexual conduct in this way, and this is stuff of like high level diplomacy. It is not Massachusetts regional murder case of a Boston police officer. There's some disconnect here between the tactics we're seeing and what happened.
Yeah. It's and what worries me is that we won't get to the bottom of it, because if there's anything wrongdoing on the part of Josh Levy or anything, just something he's embarrassing about, he's in the position to largely control what gets released and what doesn't. I know there's the OIG and the ethics office and things like that. So there is some hope we can place on it. And again, I'm not accusing Josh of any wrongdoing. I don't know, but these guys will always try to cover their own asses. So,
well, the U.S. attorney, if we're speaking about Mr. Levy, pardon me, I have a disability where I can't swallow air right, so I burp sometimes. If we're talking about the U.S. attorney, wasn't it Mr. Levy when he was the first assistant U.S. attorney under Rachel Rollins, who was approached by Rachel Rollins and asked to open a pretextual investigation into Kevin Hayden to punish Hayden for beating Ricardo Arroyo, and didn't first U.S. Assistant Attorney Levy not say anything at the time and not report it until way after the fact when an investigation into Rollins happened? Now, I have a theory on all of this. What if Mr. Yannetti and Mr. Jackson and Mr. Levy are connected? And what if Mr. Levy wanted Miss Rollins' job? That, I think, would maybe explain why Karen Reed's defense team has so many friends in this office. But I don't even know if that explains it, because just doing someone a favor doesn't justify opening a federal probe. Trying to do that is what got Rachel Rollins fired, in fact.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't seem like yeah, I think there's something potentially to that, and he now has her job, so it worked. But again, to actually be manipulating behind the scenes in some Machiavellian way, it doesn't seem to match the pedigree of a guy of his education and his elite level of being a lawyer. So I'm a little skeptical of that. But the thing is too, Grant, is you always, every day is a new chance to do the right thing. To let it's not just about your political life or your own personal ambitions, anything, starting a YouTube channel, whatever. Every chance is a day to look in the mirror. And actually, I think I want to hear you talk about this too. So Mike Crawford did that last week. Whatever his motives were, or how that came about, and he did talk about you too. He did do that. So every day is a chance, and he talked about it as being a result of self-reflection. And I think it's a chance for the feds to do that too if they're not corrupt. If someone like Josh Levy is a guy that has a reputation, of being a straight guy, it's a chance to come clean. Will he do it? But what do you think?
Well, two things to the latter point about Levy, U.S. Attorney Levy. I normally wouldn't say, oh, well, because there was something weird going on in the FBI and the DOJ, that automatically means that the U.S. attorney was involved, whether he was first assistant back then or U.S. attorney now. But what's weird about this is why Reed was saying things about Levy being involved, and I'm talking back to 2022 now. So that kind of, it's not that it puts the Machiavellian, to use your word, theory more forefront for me, but it just raises more questions that I don't have answers to. On the Mike Crawford,
and I think.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, please.
Well, on the Mike Crawford thing, I don't know. I've talked about it before. We used to work together. We definitely had an acrimonious falling out. I don't like how he takes advantage of people's volunteer labor and then parades around as the champion of workers when he doesn't, have his own house in order. But I also think, if you do something morally egregious, like hurt children or abuse women, I will hold a grudge and spend my entire life trying to ruin you. But if you are just idiot who is self-centered and greedy and you want to repent, I'm not going to deny you Jesus's love because you've personally hurt me in the past. So that's where I came down on Mike Crawford. Do I think he's terrified? Yeah. Should he be, because of what he did on December 25th between 5:25 p.m. Eastern and 11:37 p.m. Eastern or whatever it was regarding that videotape? Yeah, he should be fucking terrified. But that's if the come to Jesus moment is because the criminal justice system finally figures out how to deal with these morons, fine. I'm all for that. I'm not a drug war proponent, but I absolutely support using the criminal justice system to humiliate the self-conceit of stupid criminals who hurt other people. Absolutely. No doubt about it.
Mm-hmm. It was interesting. So a few days after Mike, and I want to repeat, I think everybody deserves that chance to start over. So to me,
except Mike for child rapists.
No, of course, but I'm speaking generally. And if Mike was sincere and he sounded sincere, it's to be encouraged. Anybody that's going to take that approach of asking questions on both sides, trying to get to the truth. That's been the problem with this case, is that pretty much every other channel is not even trying to get to the truth. The Glairer doesn't care about the truth. He's caring about, it's a hustle for him. It's just a hustle. So, and that's how most of the other channels have been, and it's a little frustrating to me. But Turtle Boy from prison reached out and had to me, you have to understand, his threats are going to be subtle, but that doesn't mean they're not threats. And it wasn't so much against me. It was targeting other channels who he's afraid will, to put it in his words, waver from the official Free Karen Reed narrative. And he said the internet's forever.
Who is he? John Gotti?
Yeah, I mean, it's just ridiculous, but this is how this mob acts. And so those marching orders went out to his cult members, that anybody that wavers, but he was directing it at other YouTube channels who have been locked solid on the Free Karen Reed, but who may have the potential to ask questions. And this is when he first took me on this summer, not because I was on the other side, but because I was in the middle asking questions. And he kept accusing me of both sidesism. Every channel should be, both sidesism should be your default position that you start out at, until you're sure you have enough evidence. And even then, you should always be willing to hear evidence from another side that comes out. So, but that's what we're dealing with here in this cult of Aidenism. And that, to me, it's not a personal grudge from me against Aiden. I really don't have any feelings towards that guy one way or the other. But what he's created, this mob, is dangerous. And
I think more than that, I think it's an extremist movement. Let's be clear. I've said this before. I'm not joking when I tell you that I'm encouraging, using public statements, authorities to treat you all like extremists and use the fact that your leaders have been weaponizing your ignorance for profit as grounds to charge them with RICO offenses. This isn't a joke. I think you're used to people getting up on these shows, not you, Kevin, but some of Turtle Boy's audience. I think they're used to people engaging in vacuous grandstanding. And I don't think any of you realize just how the justice system functions when it is upset. It's one thing, I think we've talked about this before. It's one thing if you just go through life and, you're just being yourself, and maybe one day you like take a bag of chips from the store or something, which you shouldn't do, right? Because it's not moral. But is the weight of the government going to crush you for taking chips? No. But if you're pissing off the government and then you do really bad things, I can assure you that that is a very good way to get the government's attention, which is exactly how it should function.
I would say this though, Grant, where we probably differ on this, and I differ on this maybe in different ways too with Kate. And it's not that I'm right. I'm a little wary of hyper weaponizing the government because I don't trust the government, and that authority and those powers tend to get abused. So to me, my focus here has always been I want to shine a spotlight on what these aidenists do. And this is what I'm working behind the scenes now, and it is coming together. I want to target who are the people that are now running his channel, who are the people that are now running his blog, because the people running that stuff have to be aware that these tactics of what they do, of threatening people to try to embarrass them and all this stuff. This is, but the answer to me is not some big government thing. The answer to me is to expose it and to rely, hopefully, on the decency of the majority of our citizens that don't want any part of that.
That's not going to work. I think that it's
maybe not. Maybe it's naive, I guess, but
no, not that it's naive. It's just that's not what these people. I'm talking about the Turtle Boy supporters. It's not what they understand. Like until the spell is broken, it's fully locked in place. And no matter how much the public is out there saying you're all idiots, they're still going to go they're going to go be toxic and do dangerous things and cause harm to people. So therefore, this is why I am such a strong proponent of doing. Now, I totally agree with you. It can be weaponized. You have to engage in a very refined level of oversight of the government. But I'm telling you that the reason we have a criminal justice system is because of the danger of extremist movements like this proliferating unchecked because people feel that there's no consequences for their behavior. Now, here's the scary thing for these people who have been engaging in this behavior. We live in a modern culture. I've talked about this tension before, where if people don't experience an immediate consequence, they're like, I got away with it. No, absolutely not. And it's not until that first moment where the full weight of the justice system comes crashing down on you that you realize how screwed you are. And that's, I think, why you're seeing a lot of these people drop off like flies. Like it's starting. They're screwed. The people who are still hanging on need the money, probably, frankly. And then there might be some true believers. But anyone who's still making money off this, like right now, while there's a grand jury ongoing, you're crazy. You're out of your mind.
So when we spoke the first time you came on the show a few weeks ago, and I think very much to your credit, you said you hadn't really concluded anything about the Karen Reed case. And I know part of that is probably, I think your preference is to wait till the trial, and that's very logical, and I appreciate that. But I'm wondering if you've changed at all in that since over the last few weeks of looking into it.
Yes, absolutely. I have an opinion now.
What piece of evidence was the most decisive? Because there's different ways you can look at. We could look at even just the fact that the feds seem to have not found anything, or they're reading the tea leaves in that. But was that a factor, or is there some other piece of evidence that you've looked at?
Yeah, I think we would have seen someone suspended, like one of the stadies suspended, if the feds found anything. So I don't think they did. I think you were very right about that. I don't know if it was one piece of evidence. I think it was a few things. I think the first thing was, I don't think the trip to meet up with Jen McCabe and that other woman was the first trip that Karen Reed took that night. Right. So that, I think, is what did it for me. The second thing that did it for me is I fully believe that Mr. Domestic Violence Defender, Mr. Bradle there,
Right. Yeah.
was dumb enough to go talking about how Reed sent a message to her lawyer admitting to
Yeah.
hitting John
Don't,
O'Keefe.
please don't. I know I'm well aware of the message. I do think that just please don't say the specifics of what was in it, if it's okay with you, Grant, because
Oh, I'm only reporting what was already made public by. This was
I
not
know,
made
I know,
public by me. This was not.
I
This
know.
was
I
made
just
public on social media.
Yeah, I know, I know that. I'm just saying, but in fairness to Karen, that should I'm trying not to make that public, at least on my channel, anyways. And I've known about it for a while, but it's
I think it
inadmissible,
is fair to say
and
that
so
it's an
it
allegation
shouldn't.
that. I think it's
Yeah,
fair to
it
say
shouldn't.
that it's an allegation that she said that.
Yeah, it shouldn't have leaked. It shouldn't have leaked. It's inexcusable that it did leak. So let's try to respect her right to a fair trial and not put that out there. But yeah, I know what you're saying. So
Do you
obviously you've
think
heard about the
Karen
message.
Reed respect? Yeah. Do you think Karen Reed respects Karen Reed's right to a fair trial?
No, I mean, but that's irrelevant really to me. To me, I want to try to have one standard and apply it to everything. I try to do that in life, and apply it to everything and everybody. And that's why I know there's a tendency on some people, after waiting months and suffering through this, to want to strike back at the Free Karen Reed people. But I don't want to do that in a way that uses their methods. For instance, trying to dig into someone's background, particularly because even if you're getting real things, like say with the glare, I'm not going to say what was found, and it's very damaging, but it's not relevant to his analysis, so I wouldn't want to put it out there. But because what they in their hands, what they do is they take it a step further. They're so determined to dig dirt that they take things that aren't even real and they embellish it or twist it into something. So in my case, I owned a bar that catered a lot to college kids, and we were very strict on IDs. And but it's kids are going to get fake IDs and try to come in. And as one of the more famous college bars around, we had the authorities coming in raiding us all the time, and they would card everybody in there to try to find. Only once did they find a kid with a fake ID, and it was a guy who was a week away from turning 21, and he had a good fake. So, but they take that and they twist it into something totally different involving minors and try to smear me with that. It's just, but that's how they operate. And this is the Aidenism that I want to stop, this cult here in its tracks, but I don't want to use their methods.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. Let's draw a distinction here. There is a huge difference between what you're describing, which I think, if anything, we're kind of moving away from in a good way related to this case. There is less of that toxicity, of the threats to people's children, of the subversion, of the weaponization. There's a more narrowed focus on the merit of the discourse. I think that's good. And I do agree with you that tit for tat subversion in that way is not healthy. I have another thought, though, which is the tactics of the Turtle Boy people were not to use the justice system in good faith to uphold and defend the integrity of the justice system. It was quite the opposite, actually. So there is going to be consequences for them doing that, but it doesn't need to come from anyone on the internet. That is not how the criminal justice system works. People should just let things play out, and then accountability occurs as it happens. And the reality is, listen, people get very wrapped up in the hype of all this, but consequences in terms of jail and all of this other stuff are forever. Like, the media is going to go away. The story is going to go away. The consequence will be the people in jail or the people with records. So don't get too caught up in the hype of this. Those of you who are still sort of drinking the Kool-Aid, the peripheral Kool-Aid, the proverbial Kool-Aid, please don't. It's going to end someday, and you'll be left holding the bag, and you'll feel very empty and abused.
I'm going to half agree and half disagree. I do agree with you that the way to address this problem primarily has to be through let justice do its work. However, I do not believe in just standing back and trusting that justice will be fair and will care. And I believe that it's, for instance, even just with the Alberts and the McCabe's and Morrissey and any of the other people that have been smeared in this case, if you just stand back, if you think the feds were part of something dirty and you're just going to trust the system, that's a mistake. And the only way to expose it, the only way to truly put a spotlight on something is to create media pressure. It's the only way. Now, unfortunately, I don't work for the Boston Globe. I'm just a very small YouTube channel. So it really needs to come from larger media sources. But even to the extent that a smaller channel like me gets the ball rolling, without somebody bigger will hopefully pick up these things and run with them. Somebody maybe like a Gretchen Voss that has more credibility and start digging into this, because otherwise, even I would say even Grant, I want to curious. Let me ask you this. So the unusual statement by the U.S. attorney the other night, correcting Yannetti, do you think that was influenced by the massive media coverage that's been going on? Do you think it would have happened without that?
No, I think the decision, yes, but I think the decision was made in late December. It wasn't made in the past few weeks. I think it was made in late December. I think it wasn't the media pressure per se. It was Turtle Boy being an idiot. That was like the variable in all this. So I think to some degree, you don't just let the justice system do its work. Have you ever written a law or helped write a law, Kevin?
Obviously not. I would like to, but no. You may have misunderstood my question. So the U.S. the U.S. Attorney's Office corrected Yannetti's false statement the same day.
Do I think it was no? I don't think that the reason the U.S. AG's office corrected Yannetti that day was because of media pressure in the like in the recent short term. That's what I'm getting at. I think that a lot of this stuff is a fait accompli, like a preemptive fait accompli. That's the whole point of getting ahead of the Overton window and limiting the range of acceptable discourse about a topic in the public sphere. You're trying to manufacture an outcome. It's called, have you ever read Chomsky's book, Manufacturing Consent? That's like what this is all about.
I'm not at all a fan of Chomsky, but sorry.
Well, setting aside he has lots of views, but like he's a theorist fundamentally of this kind of thing, like how consent gets manufactured in the country. He's a language theorist. His big thing was about the contraction of the word it and is. Anyway, so trying to pull this back here, you don't just give yourself over to the justice system and say, I hope this all works out. That's not what would have been done here. Like this was a fait accompli. Like what Yannetti walking into that hearing, right? It was already decided, I would guess, that if he said something stupid, like the DA was a target of a federal investigation, they had that statement ready to go. It was more just, was Yannetti going to walk in, be that dumb? They were going to give him a chance. But here's what it really may have been. It may have been the other way. Yannetti and Jackson and Reed are all so pot committed to this that he had no choice. Trial's coming up. He had to go in there and say that. I
think it was smart actually, because I saw Turtle Land celebrating like they had just won the Super Bowl, and very few of them were aware, and probably are still aware to this day, that the U.S. Attorney's Office corrected it. So I'd say it was effective.
No, they know that because that was on every station. And it's only that they are well aware of it. They don't like it, but they're aware of it. And I think that was what the most interesting part was when I was walking out of the court. I was I was chatting to a gentleman who does like addiction recovery or something, and he's a Turtle Boy fan. Nice guy on the whole. Anyway, so he has a Twitter account. I've talked to him a few times. So I'm talking to him, and he's like, we really have to see what comes out from this, these federal letters and what all this leads to. So they were all watching very closely. There's no doubt in my mind they knew the USAG put out that statement. I think what's hard for people, and this is why I try to be very direct and tolerant, and I try to really explain what's going on. No one is expected to be an expert in criminal procedure as a baseline. Even more so, no one is expected to be an expert in federal criminal procedure, which literally involves like security clearances and all this stuff you don't want to even get into. So as a result of that, when lawyers, like there's one guy, Peter on Twitter, who's a really smart lawyer, when lawyers try to explain this to people, or people who study the law try to explain it, there's a lot of steps, like that have a lot of inferences one has to make, because no one in government, especially the federal government, is ever going to tell you what's actually going on. You're not entitled to that information. You're not going to get that information. You need to use what you know to interpret what they're saying. And so that's why I think this is so hard for people, because they're used to propaganda. So when you get something that's like anti-propaganda, which is like, I'm going to hide the ball from you, it doesn't smack you in the face. It's not a meme. It's not easy to understand. So then someone
It's
like
not a
you or
narrative.
right, someone like you or I is to come in and say, okay, everyone, here's the puppet show, and here's what's going on, and everyone's, oh, and it's not their fault. No one expects anyone to be an expert in any of this. That's why it's so complicated, and that's why it's so easy to weaponize. That's why I don't like people who do PR in this sector, because I think that it is a threat to our justice system, because lay people do not understand the legal process at even its most basic level. That is why you should always shut up when a cop is talking to you. Don't mean to insult any of the cops. I'm just saying, if a cop walks up to you, you say, I'm shutting up now, go away.
Yeah. And, I'm not a lawyer, but one of the things that you can usually rely on is common sense. The laws have evolved going back to British common law and further back to Roman law. They've evolved over time now. And in most situations, you may not be able to cite what the law is, but you can say, if you can able to look at both of the issues and say, what's the common sense here? So for example, I started reaching out in the last few months to my old, one of my best friend from college is now a judge out in Colorado. And I said, what would happen if the feds had exculpatory information about a state murder case that may have involved corruption? So this exculpatory information was needed by her. And he said they would not give that information over until their investigation was done. And it bothered me, but I got somebody who watches this channel who is a retired FBI agent who did most of his work with federal grand juries. And he told me the way it works made me feel better, because you can apply the rule of common sense. So what he said is that they would do things, for example, send a targeting letter to the investigating officials that they suspect even possibly might be corrupt. And even their appearance might be put off till way down the road. But that targeting letter, and even if they normally would get a witness letter, but because they wanted to get, the idea would be to get these guys on administrative leave, they would send them a targeting letter, and then that targeting letter would go to their police departments. And so these guys would be put on administrative leave until they were cleared or whatever. And so because that hasn't happened here, and the state troopers that are involved in this are still up to their knees and doing murder investigations in their regular work, you could look at that and say that is common sense to me, that the feds did not find anything that indicated to them that the investigation was corrupt. So to me, that's the common sense standard.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really venture too much. I can't put it all together as to what the absence of a targeting letter means, but I do think practically we would have seen suspensions, and there weren't.
Yeah.
I think people would have known about that. So I do think that it's over. This whole ploy to weaponize this federal process. But I think what I still can't wrap my head around, I think I kind of understand, but I can't fully, is why it's over. And I think part of the answer is nothing was done. There wasn't any misconduct found by the Norfolk DA. But then you have to wonder, if the feds were aware of the state grand jury, because obviously part of these communications reference that state grand jury into Reed and Turtleboy, maybe a good faith, federal investigator says, wow, maybe this needs to be looked into as well.
Do you buy my theory about a whistleblower being the predication for it?
Is the whistleblower's name Rachel Rollins?
No, it would have to be somebody that's my guess is that it's a Canton cop, but it could be some other. It could, in theory, I guess, be a medical staff, but a first responder that was there that saw something unusual. But I think more than likely it needs to be.
You're talking about the whistleblower to the feds.
to the whistleblower that would have got Josh Levy and the feds gave them the predication they needed to investigate this case.
And you're talking about in 2022?
2022. So long before the data came out from phones or anything like that.
Yeah, that makes your theory carry a lot more water, because there aren't who would have even had the reason to do that. Well, Karen Reed clearly knew somebody did this. So what you're saying is the whistleblower had to be in the orbit probably of Reed and then go to the AG, the U.S.
No,
Attorney's
what I'm
office.
saying that what I'm saying is well, yes, they may have reached out to Reed, sure, yeah. So what I'm saying is that let's say you have either a DA with a U.S. attorney with a political motive to go after the DA, or you had some attorneys in the U.S. attorney's office, Josh Levy or somebody else, that wanted to do Yannetti or Jackson a solid. They still need something in order to ground that investigation, and it doesn't seem like anything is there. You got the autopsy photos, but that doesn't seem strong enough because you have the medical reports that say he wasn't in a fight. So
unless it was,
me.
well, unless it wasn't the Karen Reed case, like unless there was already something being looked at and then this was just kind of added on. That would seem to be the most logical.
Well, I entertained that for myself for months going back to this summer. But then when hearing how the way Josh Levy grilled to the point of bringing one of the witnesses to tears, this was not them just doing due diligence related to some other case. The Karen Reed the Karen Reed investigation was in focus. I don't think there's any, I think that's pretty clear to me anyways. So to me, that's why I would think maybe they had a whistleblower that they could at least say, all right, we got this person in the room. He's signing the papers. He's seen or heard a few odd things. And that might be enough to give them what they wanted, which was the investigation for whatever reason.
Yeah, but that even descriptively, that doesn't really answer the why is there so much anger at Michael Morrissey, by the USAG. It can't just be that Morrissey's former staffer is married to somebody in the public corruptions unit. Like somebody doesn't like Michael Morrissey, and it's not just Rachel Rollins. And I can't really figure out why. But it's
what are you basing that on? What's the evidence that?
Because nothing would make sense. Nothing makes sense about why the federal probe transitioned from Rollins to Levy when almost every other probe in that in the political context that happened under Rollins was subject to intense OIG scrutiny. So there's only there's only one way that this probe could have continued forward from Rollins to Levy, and that's if it withstood some kind of scrutiny. And unless the scrutiny is from another parallel situation involving the Canton police and the Norfolk DA, which is possible, then the only other option is someone really dislikes Michael Morrissey in the political chain of command.
Let me give you another piece of the puzzle. So after Ted Daniels' his first story on this, on the feds, which was maybe early December, the next day, Turtle Boy published something in TB Daily News, which he said Rachel Rollins did not initiate this investigation. Now, when I looked at that, I started entertaining ideas that maybe he has a mole inside the U.S. Attorney's Office. Maybe he's even a CI for the FBI. I no longer believe those things. I think what happened was, now since I've listened to what the messages that Natalie was a go-between for, and when Karen was telling him that Josh Levy is making an exception, in quotes, and getting involved in this. So Karen was the source for Turtle Boy, and Karen obviously told Turtle Boy that Josh Levy is their man in the feds.
Yeah, but you're ignoring the obvious, which is that Turtle Boy and Rachel Rollins never stopped talking.
That may be, they were, in his words, she weaponized him back in the 2020 election. So maybe
they kept talking. They kept talking. There is no doubt in my mind that Rachel Rollins and Turtle Boy had a channel of communication, starting with Rayla Campbell, and then moving on due to a mutual animosity between Turtle Boy,
Monica Cannon Grant,
and Rollins and Monica Cannon Grant.
Yeah.
So all I think, again, overlapping concentric social circles. None of this, as you have said before correctly, is a straight line. All of this is a penumbra. It's like trying to define the right of privacy in the 3rd, 4th, and 9th Amendment. right? That's what we're exercising. This is an exercise in reading between the lines. And the difficult part of this is there's no text. This is all ethereal and non-temporal and very hard to make concrete, despite our best efforts.
Yeah, right. We as humans want to have that unifying thing that unites the story together, that through line like you'd see in a movie, and it all comes. But in reality, like you said, there are overlapping needs and things that are just intersecting here. So I wanted to ask you, Grant, changing the subject a little bit, why don't you just? I'm curious to know more about you. You told us a little bit in another episode, but what are your interests? What kind of journalism do you do? Where do you want to go in the future? And I see you have a mic set up there. Are you going to start your own channel? You know, what's going on? Tell us more about Grant.
Oh, well, people don't really ask me that very often. That's nice of you. Let's see. So I broadcast regulatory hearings. I've broadcast every single Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission monthly public meeting that's ever occurred, including the times when they do regulatory drafting and meet 7 days in a row. I broadcast every one. Do that on my Facebook feed. So facebook.com/Grant Smith Ellis. You can see all the archives. I do pre-show commentary. I clip the meetings in real time and then promulgate those clips with analysis on social media. I think this is the only regulatory agency in the country, maybe in the world, that's subject to that level of second-by-second scrutiny. I think it perplexes them a little bit, but that's okay. It's done from a place of love, and I hope they all understand that. So that's some of what I do. Then I also, of course, work for Jurist, which is an international legal publication. I cover a number of different topics for Jurist, but if it were up to me, I would exclusively focus on South Lebanon and Yemen because I'm very interested in those areas. But I've covered everything from the recent situation in Ecuador, where the president declared an internal armed conflict after terrorists took over a TV station and started executing prison guards following the escape of a drug lord, and to the situation in Guatemala, where there was almost an attempted coup during the inauguration of the new president within the last week, to a situation in China where the former chairman of the banking giant I think it was Evergreen or Evergiant, a very big Chinese banking conglomerate run by the state, was arrested on corruption charges. So anything I can learn about, I have a ravenous appetite for information, and for some reason it all stays up in my head like an index or an encyclopedia, and then I can just put it out when I need it, when something comes up and there's some interesting context I can explain. So I guess that's me. I'm a little bit of a I don't know, jack of all trades, and I try to cover as much as possible, and I do it almost all in a volunteer capacity because a long time ago I heard the call to be a priest when I was praying to the Virgin Mary outside Baps Library at BC when I was a graduate student. And I'll never forget that night in 2013, because I heard this very specific sentence, which was, "The world is yours to behold if you can abscond from your temporal inclinations." And everyone hears the call in a different way. But for me, it was more than just the words. It was almost like I woke up the next day and I never wanted for anything again. I just kind of lived to serve, went where I was called, and things would kind of align and happen for me. And I've kind of done that ever since. I don't really try to make money. I don't do a very good job sustaining myself or feeding myself or any of those things that would make one a human, but I am really good at helping people, and that makes me happy. So that's me.
So the Virgin Mary used the word temporal. Wow, she's been keeping up on times wherever she is. She used some pretty interesting language.
Well, I can't say that it was the Virgin. The Virgin Mary is the patron saint of the Jesuit order, and they run BC.
Yeah.
So they have these little shrines to her, and that's where you pray. It's actually very nice. But I don't think the words were coming from her. It was a disembodied voice. I wouldn't say it was male or female, but it definitely felt maybe a little bit higher up the chain of command.
All right. So dreaming for the future. Podcasts or maybe a mainstream journalistic job in journalism, something covering international issues. What are you thinking? Where aim high? What do you make your dreams, at least lay your dreams out there so you might have a chance to reach them?
Oh, well, so originally I wanted to become a Jesuit priest so I could go to Rome, become a member of the Curia, and then get close to the Pope so I could benevolently influence world policy and the furtherance of human rights. So that's kind of like where I wanted to get to initially. So ever since I've split from that path, now like law school professor, I think would be okay. I'd be okay with
Mhm.
doing some journalism. If like the government wants to come and recruit me and take me into the bowels of their system, I'm totally happy with that. I'm open to all sorts of things, but I really need to be used in a benevolent way to provide a check and balance against the worst inclinations of humanity, I think.
What about podcasting or anything like that?
I This is kind of like what I do to relax. So other than my broadcasting of the regulatory hearings, I'll go on, get shows or whatnot whenever someone needs me, but I'm not like an administrative person. Like I don't like to set things up. I don't want to build a brand. I don't really
Mhm.
do things on a set schedule. I just am in it 24/7, 365. So no, I
Yep.
don't think I'm going to do like something structured. I think you can expect just more fire hose of information all the time.
And I don't, it doesn't have to be structured. Trust me, you never know when I'm coming on. I don't have a set day or time. So if you launch your own channel, you just go on and talk about whatever you want to talk about. And if you're like me, your mic comes undone and all kinds of technical shit happens. But so, but it's, it can be, it can be rewarding, but it also sometimes can be, I don't know if I'd say stressful, more just, you're burning energy that you might rather use for something else. Because I'm a writer, I'd rather be doing some of the projects that I'm working on. But I still do enjoy doing it to a degree. I never saw myself as wanting to be behind a mic or into journalism or anything like that. But at least as far as covering this case, I'm going to do it until hopefully the cows come home. And I'd like to see him come home soon, but hopefully it may not. I don't know. Hopefully the trial does actually go on in March, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we will. I think obviously the next date is there's going to be some Turtle Boy court dates in the interim, although he's not getting out of jail anytime soon, at least within the next 30 days.
Mhm.
Then, of course, the Karen Reed pre-trials will be the 15th and then the 26th, I think, of February, and then the trial scheduled to start the 12th of March. There are a lot of moving pieces here. I was saying this earlier on Twitter today. If Miss Reed had an ounce of compassion in her body, or even I mean, she's very intelligent, but if she had some semblance of rational thought left, which I hope she does, despite the stress, which must be very
Mhm.
overwhelming, she would plea and allocute. If
Yeah.
she hit him by accident, she should stand up and give the family the closure they deserve. And she, Karen Reed, is the person who holds in her hands the ability to finally put this tormented mob of morons out of their misery and protect the innocent lives that have suffered needlessly over the past few years, just to try to buy Karen Reed this long shot bid at beating these charges by undermining the jury pool. She should allocute and she should take the plea to manslaughter. I don't know why she won't, other than pride, but she should.
And that's, for me too, I understand, I can sympathize with the idea of trying to create, this applies to the defense lawyers too, of trying to create a possible third party culprit theory. But when you start pointing the finger, when you're using lies in order to point your finger at innocent people, such as an 18-year-old, well, he was 17 at the time of John's death, and I think he's probably 19 now, but an innocent kid, and you're trying to smear him as a murderer and potentially ruin his life. I really can't even justify defense attorneys doing that. I don't think it's really, it's not honorable. It's not, I understand you have to do your best to defend your client, but I don't think smearing innocent people should be something that's acceptable. But
Well, I think really what it comes down to is whether it was done knowingly. Like, there's a reason why the standard is actual malice in the context of public figures, at least.
yeah.
I'm not going to go into details on it. I'm just going to explain on a general level that if a lawyer, you can't knowingly get someone off who's guilty. Like that's the line. If that's really the line. Like if your client tells you that they're guilty and you lie about it, that's a problem. So but there's always this tension because your client might be like, I didn't do it, with a wink, or your client might be like, I didn't do it, and you might happen to know they did it, right? Those are three different situations, each calling for a different ethical response. Now, I'll tell you, lawyers, it's not up to the lawyer whether they stay on a case. Did you know this?
I know in rare examples, and we just saw this in the Delphi murders, they had the lawyers pulled, but they were just reinstated by the Supreme Court out there in Indiana this week. The hearing was the same day as the one in Delphi, and I listened to that hearing too. And so it's going to be extremely rare for lawyers to be taken off a case where the client wants to retain those lawyers and they want to
Correct.
and they want to stay with the client. So,
and it basically only happens in the context of the court feeling that the integrity of the process was undermined. It's basically like an extreme sanction for a lawyer.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but and I think that people should understand this because it's pretty obvious. Whether you're a journalist, a lawyer, a citizen, a cop, it doesn't matter. All of the laws apply to you at all times. And I think people have this very wishy-washy conception of like, lawyers are just criminals who wear suits and know how to get people off. No, the profession of being a lawyer is not engaging in RICO conspiracies with the mob. That like that's an example. Like that, people who do that get a very bad reputation. And it's kind of starting to resemble that here, where there were some tactics used here that weren't, outright, shooting witnesses in the back of the head and throwing them in trunks of cars, thank God, but induced a very similar level of psychological terror. I mean, I don't think people really have come to terms with that because nothing in terms of consequences for what those victims and witnesses suffered is going to fully come to bear until this criminal process is over. But there's going to, I don't know where I wouldn't predict one civil process coming out of this. I'd predict like 77 civil suits coming out of this.
I think it's very difficult to prove some of these things. For instance, in Aiden's case last week, so his lawyer sent 2 private eyes. I'm not going to say the victim's name. I think we probably could say it because it's been highly publicized. But to the victim's house the morning she was supposed to testify in court or be in court for Aiden's arraignment. And not only that, but somebody sent investigators from the DCF, Department of Child and Family Welfare. And Turtle Boy is known to have a mole inside DCF because he's always, one of his ways of digging dirt on people involves any family issues, with your kids and stuff like that. So there was clearly a central plan here to try to prevent her from testifying. And I was getting reports that morning, she's not in court, blah, blah, blah. So, but you'll never be able to prove that that's why they sent those guys there, unless you could actually get one of those private eyes to say, yes, we were told to try to stop her. But that's no one's stupid enough to do that. So I just think it's going to be very difficult to prove wrongdoing in these cases on the lawyers.
Well, that's a very specific example of wrongdoing. But remember, a lot of things. First of all, let's talk about released audio footage of a court hearing that had legally redacted sidebars included. And they can tell me all they want. They tried to edit the sidebars out. They didn't edit the one out at the clip at the timestamp 1 hour, 33 minutes and 25 seconds of the clip Turtle Boy put up of the hearing. That included legally privileged sidebar material about the threats that were sent to the children of the victim in that domestic violence restraining order hearing, which, by the way, the victim met her burden and the restraining order was extended by a year by the fact finder, a separate fact finder to the judge who issued the first 10-day restraining order in the case, by the way. That sidebar should never, ever have been produced in that form. It should never have been promulgated to the public. But as a result, it is now very clear that exactly what you said is true. But let's back up a little bit. It's not just about whether the investigators who went to the victim's home on the morning that the victim was supposed to go into court could be in some trouble. It is that we may have a situation where, as you mentioned, DCF and other agencies have been being weaponized. But here's where I was getting to with the silver lining in all this. I can assure you, I don't have anything to confirm it, but I can assure you that somebody from that courthouse, and probably the judge, called multiple state agencies that day and said, why is my witness being subject to this harassment while she's in my courtroom? How has this structure fallen so far that you all have become a tool of targeting my witness? I want an answer. That's what I would have done if I were the judge. But one gets the vibe that maybe that's what it took for the system to get kind of shaken into realizing that something was very wrong. To that point, just a few days later, did the Massachusetts House not vote 159 or 1-0 to pass the Revenge Porn Act? So I think the reality is that this stuff, the behavior of Mr. Kearney and those in his orbit and Miss Reed was being enabled by, I don't know, a fearful, complacent, enabling governmental apparatus that is now facing its judgment day.
And I've heard from numerous people in the press and in law enforcement and other things that basically are saying that they and other people are afraid to take on anything to do with Aidan Kearney because, in fact, I even have been told they had a hard time finding a prosecutor, a special prosecutor, because nobody wants to take on that blog. And so what he's done is knowingly created a mob, and that's what he turned on the victim in Rhode Island. But apparently, to some degree, this has been enabled by people that should know better, that are listening to this channel right now, some of them that should have a sense of decency to know that this is wrong, but also by perhaps the FBI agent that interfered and who knows what else. And there's a lot of people that work for these agencies that defend or are a part of his mob. They're part of his mob. So let's wrap it up there but go ahead, say whatever you want. We got time. So go ahead.
Well, no, I think that is a good place to kind of naturally conclude because I really don't understand the fatal attraction here. This man ruins lives, and maybe Karen Reed and Turtle Boy are similar and they deserve each other's shared fate in some regard. Because when you have such a myopic, self-centered approach to interacting with the polity, it's not like your individual life. This is not high school drama. You're threatening the integrity of the republic, of something that people have died for, of something that people dedicate their entire lives to protecting. And you may be able to, in the short term, create this static to noise ratio that undermines the work that those people are doing. But make no mistake, they are not afraid of Mr. Kearney. They may have been outpositioned by Mr. Kearney through some horrific breakdown in our structure of justice, our system of justice, but I don't think they're afraid of Mr. Kearney. It's just a matter now of how the chips are going to fall and then who they're going to crush on the way down. And I think we can already starting to see it happen. There were people who weren't at that Karen Reed hearing on Thursday that are normally always there. I don't know what that means, but and coupled with the way Crawford was acting and the timeline, there's just a lot of criminal exposure here for a lot of people. And it's more just a question of how many of them are going to get cuffed, I think, at this point. So, yeah, ironic, right? They spent 18 months threatening these, witnesses and victims with this psychological terror. And now it's them who must go to sleep every night wondering if the knock's coming for them the next morning. And that, I believe, is how God dishes out punishment. So, I don't know. Dwell
Guys,
on that.
I want to thank you very much, Grant. I appreciate it as always. Learn a lot as always. Guys, I want to just close with this too. We need you. I don't mean this channel. I mean, society needs you to step up, do the right thing, stand up to this mob, stand up to these tactics. And I'm talking particularly about those of you who maybe think that Karen might have gotten railroaded here. But you need to stop and look at what the tactics are here of these people and say that enough. Decent people don't go along with this. So yes, you want justice for Karen, and you want justice for, I hope you want justice for John and his family, and I hope you want justice for innocent people that might be being smeared here, right? But we need you. We need your courage. We need you to do, I'm not asking you to put your face out there and become the face of this. That's okay. I'm doing this and some other people are doing it. But reach out to me, make your opinion heard in chat, stand up to these people. It's because at the end of the day, it's not going to be stopped by some government agency. It has to be stopped by you. It has to be stopped by us. It's the only way to stop it. So stand with us. Appreciate it. Thank you, Grant. Have a good night, and we'll talk soon.